Well, you'll hear some of these stories, but we want to thank our various volunteers who've been very active this week. It's been a very busy week at the church in a good way. We had the Edison dance for special needs on Friday. We did Paint Your Dog at the Navigation Center. And some people thought we were actually painting the dogs. One dog did end up getting painted, but it was meant to be. So we were at the Civil War encampment at Central Park. I don't know if you go to that during Labor Day. And I picked up this little volume, Prayers Suitable for the Times in Which We Live. It was a little soldier's prayer book. One of the interesting things about the Civil War is, and Abraham Lincoln really nailed this in his second inaugural address, both the North and the South were praying to the same God, and he realized that God wasn't answering either of their prayers in the way they were offering them. So God must have had God's own purposes, which is what he says in that wonderful address, probably one of the best ever given. But just flipping through this yesterday, there's a prayer for our enemies. And it's interesting that the second prayer in here is a prayer for our enemies. O God, we beseech thee, forgive and pardon our enemies and give us that measure of thy grace, that for their hatred we may love them, for their cursing we may bless them, for their injury we may do them good. And I was kind of surprised to find that sort of so close to the front, because you're going to hear in all of the readings and in the preaching today, really what happens when Christianity gets in the way of you having the life you thought it was going to be, or the life you thought you were going to have. And certainly loving enemies is one of the primary virtues of Christianity that many Christians don't practice, because it's very difficult, of course, and it's very humbling. But it's also distinctive for how it was that God approached us. That when Jesus came and loved us, we were his enemies. Not because of God, but because of us. We set ourselves against him. And the reason it says he chose to suffer, if you listen to the prayer today when we said, he came to suffer, Jesus just didn't come to suffer like some sort of spiritual masochist, Jesus suffered because he came to love people that refused to love him. And in fact, rather than returning the gift of love, we gave him the cross, and our violence and our murder is what we gave him, and by his love he turned them into a gift. And that's sort of the genius of Christianity. But that's something you can think about as we think about practicing our faith. One of the virtues we must practice, or at least wrestle with, is the call to truly love our enemies. Now, if you don't have a lot of enemies, you go, well, that's not that hard. If you have real enemies, you're actually not really hoping things turn out that great for them. And part of what we're hoping isn't that they're successful in the terms of the world. That's one thing Jesus is going to break apart. Rather, what you're hoping is they get folded into the gift too. That's very different. Rather than wishing for their success in the world, you're hoping they get folded into the same gift of mercy that Christ showed us. And those are two very different pathways or trajectories. Now, at the least, Christianity can be inconvenient. We can probably agree on that. And as I told you, we had a lot of volunteers around this week. And, we're starting this little project with mobile home residents. And there's a man in his 80s whose stove is all rusted. And his neighbor said, I can get a stove if you all can pick it up. So Pete Mullen was here, and he was going to go look at it. And it turned into a whole thing. And then actually Eric Glicker was going to go pick it up if it was available. And they needed a gas stove, and it turned out to be electric. That's the short end of it. So we didn't get the stove, but we had a lot of conversation about stoves this week. But in the midst of this too, you'll remember, Alice spoke to you a few weeks ago. She has the gift cards in the back if you want to take some and give them to people who are hungry that you meet on the street. And then we had another family who actually took some of the gift cards that she did, and she put them into bags that included some sunscreen, a bottle of water and stuff. And their kids gave them to me at the end of church last week. They said, we want to do something too. And I go, okay, well, when people come, and in the back of my mind I go, well, they don't come here that often, but when people come, we'll hand them out. Well, once you know it, this week we handed several of them out. So when Pete Mullen was going to look at the stove, I called Susan and I said, Susan, there's a man, he had plugged in his phone. He was asking if he could plug in his phone. Susan, can you give him a bag? And she did. And when we found out the stove wasn't gas, that cut short the rest of the work of the afternoon. And I came back and he was sitting there with his bag and he was charging his phone. And I said, well, now that I don't have to move furniture, I can sit and talk to him. So I sat down and talked to him, and he's from Oklahoma. Now, you know that California has both a gift and a problem with bringing people from out of state to come into recovery. And the problem with it is when recovery doesn't go well or something bad happens, there's no net to catch those people and they just fall right down to the street. So this guy, who is in one of the neighborhoods over here, had a stroke. And he went to Hoag Hospital. He barely made it to Hoag Hospital. That's part of the story. And when they let him out, he wasn't able to get back in his program. And I said, okay, well, you know what? This is great because we work very closely with the city. And so we called the city social worker. The Be Well van came out. You probably saw that if you watched the video this week. And I said, this is perfect. We have these relationships and they can take care of this. Now, wouldn't you know it, because of his recent medical problems, no one would take him because no one wanted the risk of taking someone who had recently been hospitalized with a stroke. And so his vulnerability, which should have made him at the front of the line, actually limited him from being accepted into anything. And so by the time the day was over, the city had left, Be Well left, and it was just the two of us sitting there. And it's like, well, we can't leave this guy on the street. He'll get beaten up, his stuff will get stolen. He's from rural Oklahoma, and he's in Huntington Beach, sleeping in front of basilicos. It's like, well, we can't do this. So I said, we'll put you up in a hotel. And once you know it, our new youth director, who's from Oklahoma too, and her husband works in this field, we said, well, maybe we could get him back to Oklahoma. So that's what we're working on right now. There's 2 different pathways back, and we'll see what happens. But the reason this is significant is the vulnerability of people that you all are embracing that there is no program for. The people whose liability is too high, or the systems of accountability are such that the paperwork won't allow them through the door to be cared for. And this is a guy, so I took him to the hotel. It's probably about 6 o'clock on Thursday. And I think it was Thursday. Was it Thursday, Michelle? Yeah, it was Thursday. The days all run together. And he said, I went to sleep at 6:15 and I woke up at 11 the next morning. He said, I was so tired, And he sounds like a new person. And so now we'll see what happens. But it's just another sign that your generosity is making a big difference. I'll give you another example. Someone came by the office this week and they said, I want to give a check to the Good Sam Fund. And wouldn't you know it, the very next day, someone called from the city in the community and said, I've been caretaking for someone. I had to take off work to care for them. They died at my home. I don't have enough leave to cover my time I spent caring for them. And the amount they needed was exactly what the person had donated the day before. So these things, it's a reminder that God will call us to this work. Now, these aren't even our enemies. These are mostly strangers. Some of them have become friends. Imagine how much more difficult it is when your enemies are asking for your mercy, your generosity, your help. So I just wanted to highlight, we have so many people who are actively practicing faith, but it can be very inconvenient because it interrupts you. Another person's suffering interrupts you. Another person's need requires you to go in a different direction. And what happens when that inconvenience and that redirection actually makes you think, I wonder if having a relationship with God was a mistake. Now, for anyone here who feels very frustrated in your faith, this is the perfect Sunday for you to come. Because you should take that reading from Jeremiah and just cut it out and tape it somewhere or memorize it, put it in your phone. I have often thought that if I was more proactive in my planning, this would be the perfect Sunday to hire an actor and to have them present to you that reading from Jeremiah in a dramatic fashion. Because Jeremiah is not talking to God like they're having coffee going, oh God, well, how have you been? Oh, I've been good. People are trying to kill me, but it's for your sake, it's okay. Jeremiah is distraught. When Jeremiah says, oh God, he is accusing God through his teeth. He is angry. He's going, God, where are you? He's going, God, I'm doing this for you. I've never seen anyone cross-stitch this, but I've never seen anyone put this on the wall. Oh God, you are a deceitful brook. You are a failing river. Jeremiah is accusing God, saying, you've basically lied to me. There is nothing there. And of course, this is what a lot of people say about Christianity and they say about religion. There's nothing there. They just do it for themselves because they can't handle the world as it is. It's a very sort of Freudian critique of Christianity. But Jeremiah goes even deeper than that. Jeremiah, who has a relationship with God, is saying to God very intimately, you lied to me, there's nothing here, it's not worth it. The world as it is cannot be changed by your word. This is one reason why people don't engage in service of neighbors. They go, what's the point? The guy who is there on our planter this week, there will be another one next week, and there will be 2 the week after, and 2 the week after. What's the point? The world as it is cannot be changed. And so why don't we just mind our business, stay in our lane, get what we can get, and that's what life is. This is Jeremiah going, I think I might say, God, it's time for you to find someone else to do this. It's kind of lonely and sad work. And you'll notice God doesn't go, Jeremiah, I'm really sorry, that it wasn't what I planned. Yeah, sorry, but I can give you a coupon or something for lunch. Instead, God goes, look, if you want to do this, I will make you a bronze wall. Turn to me, and I will take you. And if you want to stay on the course, stay the course. God doesn't let Jeremiah off the hook. God says it's actually going to get harder. But you will prevail. But they will try and kill you. They will try and come against you. They will speak against you. They will lie about you. They will be your enemies. And Jeremiah will have to decide if he wants to take the truth of the world that God is bringing and carry it into the world as it is. And this is a world that's collapsing, though they're not willing to acknowledge it's collapsing all around them. And whether he wants to be the one to bring that message that this is going to end, but there will be a new beginning. And Jeremiah finally says, okay, I'll do that. You'll notice it's the same thing that happens when Peter makes his confession. We had that last week. You are the Messiah. You are the Son of God. You are the chosen one of God. And it says, after Peter did that, then Jesus began to tell them about why he was actually there. He wasn't just there to make a scene. He wasn't just there for the occasional healing and freeing people from spiritual oppression. He was there to be crucified by our hate. He was there to love his enemies and to suffer by loving his enemies to the degree that he would even allow them to take his life. He would open his arms and embrace, and they would take those open arms and nail them to a cross. And when the disciples start to hear, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right, it's because they think, can't we just find a way to make peace with the world as it is? Can't we just find a way to make peace with the world? Do we really need to redeem it? Sure, some people have a hard life, but you know what? Not everybody wins the game. Can't we just make our peace with the world as it is? And Jesus says, no, we can't. I'm not here to just make the world a little better. I'm here to raise the dead. I'm here to redeem the world from the inner rotting core and to make the place of death, the grave, a new womb where people can be born again. And Peter goes, no, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. It sounds kind of violent. I don't think our insurance will cover you being crucified. When you're talking about risk assessment, well, we better see if we can get a writer for that. But this is the world in which we live. I'm not saying to go out and take unnecessary risks, but maybe for the sake of the gospel we must. I am saying that if you are going to live with an openness of love, in the same way that Jesus loved us, you will suffer. And if you want to think about it, Paul offered you a long list. Now I'm going to read it because I didn't memorize it. I only memorized 3 of them. And then thinking about the list today, I go, oh, there's so many more. Paul knows. This is the whole thing that Paul was talking about in the reading today. Paul gives you at least 6 things you can do if you're wondering, how do I love in the world as it is and be part of this mission of blessing? So verses 11 through 13, don't lag in zeal. Okay. Be ardent in spirit. Well, probably, all right. Serve the Lord. These were the 3 I was going to really push. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. But he also adds 2 more. Contribute to the needs of the saints and extend hospitality to strangers. If you are looking for work to do, go and take that list from Romans today, verses 11 through 13, and ask yourself, where is it that God might call me to act? What are the things that I can do for the sake of this world? And you'll notice Paul eliminates the possibility of a kind of spiritual cynicism that will just lead religious people to offering our own brand of curse in a world that's already filled with curses. The church is sometimes renowned for the curses it places on people's lives. And you'll notice that Paul doesn't say, and now curse them in your own special way because you're Christians. Paul says, bless and do not curse. Do not return evil for evil. Return good for evil. Paul eliminates the possibility that the Christian response can be anything but a blessing. And then you go, wow, that seems really hard. And if you understand what Paul is saying, it is hard. And if you actually start doing that, you will feel the weight of your cross on your shoulders. This is what Jesus meant when he said, you will take up your cross and you will follow me. We are in a place where we want to multiply curses. We are in a place where we want to multiply violence. We're in a place where we think, well, what if we do it in a way that we end up on top? And that is not the program. The program is to follow Jesus to his cross. The program is to carry it on our shoulders, and it is to rejoice in hope, to persevere in prayer, to be patient in suffering, and to refuse to curse. I've actually thought of that for myself. If I take nothing from my own sermon, because occasionally I listen to my own sermons, I take the advice I offer others, I go, I'm going to see if I can spend one day not cursing other people. Because when I drive, when I read the news, when I hear something, and in my head I'm going, oh my gosh, but out of my mouth I go, oh, that sounds fine, it sounds fine, you know. What would it look like to return a blessing for everything that you experience? Just pick one day, pick 1 hour, and ask yourself, what would it look like to return a blessing for everything that I encounter today? And you will suffer. There will be no doubt about it. You will suffer because you will be frustrated, you will be inconvenienced, you will be humiliated. But what you will see is what Paul said, you cannot control the people around you, but you will be able to live peaceably as far as it depends on you. This is some of Paul's greatest life advice. Live peacefully, peaceably, as far as it depends on you. You can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do sometimes. You can begin to orient yourself toward this world that Jesus has opened. The project is not, how do I make peace in the world? How do I make my way in the world? How do I inoculate myself from the suffering that seems to be part of living in history? Rather, it is, how do I participate in the redemption that Jesus has brought? And at least from the stories that I shared with you at the beginning, oftentimes the way we choose here at this church is show hospitality to strangers. How many strangers have come to this place and have received a genuine hospitality, a genuine listening, a genuine belonging, a generosity from you? And so if I were to pick one of that long list, it would be that. But there's other things on the list. You may find yourself attracted to a Pauline principle that you will find renewing for your spiritual life as you hear Jesus say, take up your cross, but know at the end, I will give you fullness of life. Amen.